The Nazis did not really lose World War II. They made it appear that way in order to divert attention from the alliance between the Fourth Reich and the race of aliens known as the reptilians, an ancient galactic civilization obsessed with conquest and domination. After the German surrender in 1945, the Nazi Reptilian Alliance infiltrated the U.S. military-industrial complex through Operation Paperclip. The Nazis and reptilians removed their political opponents, such as the Kennedys, and moved into policy-making positions in post-war America, infiltrating aerospace companies, banking, media, and the U.S. government, including NASA and the CIA. But the real target was not the United States. It was the solar system.
You are listening to VERITAS. If this is your first time, welcome home. To listen to tonight's full interview and all of our material, join the VERITAS family and click on the subscribe button at veritasradio.com. You can make your purchase with a credit card, PayPal, cash, check, money order, and even cryptocurrency. We are now accepting Bitcoin, Litecoin, and Ethereum. Don't forget to visit the VERITAS store for focused life force energy, MMS, CBD pure hemp oil, Divinia water, pure organic sulfur, flash drives with all our Sanitas and VERITAS seasons, and other great products. And if you want to get in touch with Mel, want to be a guest on this radio program, have a guest suggestion, or have feedback, just click on the contact button of our website at veritasradio.com. And if you're listening on YouTube, like, subscribe, and share it. And click the bell to be notified when new interviews are available. And now, here's your host, Mel Fabregas.
And to tell us more, tonight's special guest is veteran of this radio program, Len Kasten. He's a UFO researcher and freelance writer. He's a former member of the National Investigations Committee of Aerial Phenomena and the Mutual UFO Network, MUFON. He's the author of many books: The Secret History of Extraterrestrials, Secret Journey to Planet Serpo, Alien World Order, and the latest book, which will be the focus of tonight's discussion, titled Dark Fleet, the Secret Nazi Space Program and the Battle for the Solar System. Len Kasten joins us directly from Peoria, Arizona. Hello, Len, and welcome back.
Hi, Mel. Nice to be with you.
Congratulations on the new book.
Thank you.
What was your motivation for this book? A lot of this talk for the last decade, I would say, secret space program, the relationship with the Nazis who came via Operation Paperclip. What's your motivation?
Well, when I finished my last book, Alien World Order, I began to realize that the story was not over yet, that really we have to move out into the solar system to get the rest of the story. It became clear to me after talking to some other people and doing some more research. I realized, especially the ex-super soldiers, which I think who I know you were aware of, right? You're aware of the super soldiers? Well, they were the consensus was absolutely monopolized. They monopolized that consensus that the Nazis had moved out into the solar system, and they were operating on Mars and the Moon. So I realized I had to finish my research and write the last book on this whole subject.
Before we begin, do you think, and we'll discuss Antarctica later, do you think Antarctica was the jumping board or the catalyst for them to go elsewhere if they indeed are on the Moon and Mars?
Absolutely. They created what they called Base 211 in Antarctica with the help of the reptilians. And that became their launching point for all of their space adventures.
Was that known as New Schwabenland?
Yes, it was.
Is that still there?
Well, it's still there, but now it's more of an American colony, since they have moved more to Mars and the Moon, and they've more or less abandoned Base 211. So most of the American aerospace companies that moved down there and joined with the German companies have remained there. They all have facilities there as well as other places. Now,
for anybody who thinks this is just science fiction, I have seen, and I think I may have in my collection of stuff, postcards from the 1940s with a stamp saying Little America, and others saying New Schwabenland. So there were two locations during that time, weren't they?
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's interesting. That's really interesting. Schwabenland was under the ice. It was not on the surface, of course. and it was under 2 miles of ice. But the caverns down there are so huge that they could build tall buildings there in that facility. And they did have tall buildings there. And the population grew rapidly, and the American aerospace companies, after they realized how successful the Germans were, came down there and joined them. And it became an international facility eventually.
I wanted to go in chronological order, but since you're opening these doors right from the offset, I have to go back to Admiral Byrd. What do you think happened that the Americans were handed? They left 2 weeks after instead of, I believe it was going to be a 2-3 month expedition. And after 2 weeks, they just returned. And even Chile, there are reports from a hospital saying some of these people were severely burned and injured. Some of our troops.
Are you talking about the hospitals in Chile?
Correct.
Yes, okay.
They were taking care of the American soldiers who were returning from that part of the world. I guess that was not heavily reported.
Exactly. Well, that was all the results of Operation High Jump, which I'm sure you're aware of.
Yeah, that's what I'm referring to.
Okay, yeah. Well, we didn't expect to be encountering any flying saucers in Antarctica. It was a total surprise. And the reason they had that technology there at Base 211 was because the general who was in charge of that development in Czechoslovakia, Hans Kammler, was taken down there and helped to develop the flying saucer technology at Base 211. So they were ready for us when we got there with the fleet, with Operation High Jump, and the saucers came right out of the water. And before we knew what was happening, they sunk at least one ship and supposedly killed about 68 Marines. And Byrd realized that he had no defense against that.
The question I have is, were these saucers and this exotic technology that we encounter there, were these Nazi technology or the alien technology? And if they were Nazi technology, why didn't they use it during World War II? Otherwise, they would have won with it.
Well, that's a long story. It was basically alien technology that was given to them. And if they hadn't made that alliance with the reptilians, they probably wouldn't have had it, nor would they have had all the other wonder weapons, the rockets, for instance. The German scientists were, of course, very good and very accomplished and very keen, but they did not have the ability to do what they did without the help of the reptilians. So, and think about it, it had to be, why would they have gone to Antarctica, of all places, if it hadn't been suggested to them or encouraged by the reptilians themselves? I mean, to go 6,000 miles across the Atlantic to a frozen wasteland that they knew nothing about, to spend all that money on the voyage and on the preparations on the brink of World War II, it just didn't make any sense. So they went there because they knew what to expect. They were being helped.
But here's the disconnect that I've always found with this story. And I'm not saying that it didn't happen. Something happened with Admiral Byrd for sure. And we've seen the diary and the testimonials from other people and some of his relatives. But if Nazi Germany had that technology, and obviously judging by what we saw in World War II, they had expansion in their plants. If they are now in Antarctica and they have this technology, why haven't they taken over? Or had they taken over?
Well, that was the whole point of my book, is that they did take over. They did take over. Operation Paperclip was the beginning of the takeover. And the climax of the takeover was the installation of an ex-colonel in the SS as the head of NASA. I mean, really, what else? What other proof do we need? We had two American diplomats, Allen Dulles and John Foster Dulles, brothers, who were Nazi sympathizers to begin with, and Allen Dulles was the head of the CIA.
No, I'm not disputing that story at all, because we had, would you say, about 50% of those genius people, because they were genius, whether they're Nazis or not. These people were smart. They came here, and we brought them here. But so did the Soviet Union. They got what? About 50% of it went to the Soviet Union?
Well, the Nazis wanted America because they wanted to come to this continent. They knew that they had to, if they were going to take over, they had to take over American industry because that's where all the brilliance was, and all the best technicians and all the best scientists were here. They were not in Russia, and from the very beginning, they targeted America as their future home, and they started out in Argentina, and went to Antarctica.
So whenever somebody says the Nazis lost the war, but they won the peace, what they really mean is that they actually infiltrated the U.S. from within, industry, military, government, you name it.
That's right. That's exactly what happened. And it all started with Paperclip when they took all the ex-Nazis, some of the most brutal ex-Nazis, and brought them in and scrubbed their records clean, and made them Americans, and put them to work in American aerospace companies and in government jobs. It was unbelievable, really. And Eisenhower actually found out about it.
What did Eisenhower say about this?
You have to go back and reread this Eisenhower speech. I discussed this at length in my book. What he was really warning us against in that warning speech.
The farewell speech, you mean?
I'm sorry?
The farewell speech.
Yeah, the farewell speech.
Yeah.
That he gave just before Kennedy took over. I made a point of this in the book. Did you read that part of the book?
I did.
Yeah, where that speech went through 21 drafts before they finally got it exactly the way they wanted it. He was basically trying to warn us of what had happened to our aerospace industry and to our economy, and that it was infiltrated by the Nazis. But he couldn't say it. He couldn't say it in so many words. But he did as best he could. He chose his words very carefully, and for those who had ears to listen, he was telling us, "Hey, watch out! Things have changed."
Back in those days, this is 1963. No, I'm sorry. This is 1961 when he said that, correct?
That's right. Exactly. Yeah.
Back in those days.
Kennedy's just taken office, yeah.
Exactly. So back in those days, I don't think we had, censorship. We had these people who, right now in every media platform, 30 seconds, a minute, they immediately just cut. If they don't like what they're hearing, they cut it. Do you think if Eisenhower's speech were being broadcast today, would it have made it public just like it did in 1961?
I think it would have, because he selected his words very carefully for that very reason. He couldn't really say what he wanted to say, so he had to suggest it as best he could, and I think he did a good job. I mean, it took 21 drafts before they got it right, but nobody really suspected after that speech that there was anything really to worry about, nor did he ever mention the Nazis or the Germans or any of that. So he made the point for those who had ears to listen.
So back in those days, the monster hadn't been created yet, if you will. And that's probably why they didn't, quote unquote, get it. And now we see the monster right in our face.
Exactly. And but what's interesting about that situation is that at the very time that he was giving that speech in 1960, that was precisely when Wernher von Braun was taking over the Space Center at NASA. So by that time, the takeover had already been completed by the Nazis. They were already in all the major aerospace companies. They were already working with the CIA with Reinhard Gehlen, the spy master. And that was basically the end of the story. It was done by 1960.
Do you think that NASA is just window dressing? And I think this is probably the thesis of your book, that there exists a different platform, call it the secret space program, breakaway civilization, a space force, whatever you want to call it. Do you think that is what made it to the moon? And I know that this offends a lot of people who are very patriotic, and so am I, but I really don't think that with the technology that they showed us, which by now They lost the telemetry. They lost the tapes. They lost the technology, and they said they cannot bring it back. Do you buy that?
Well, I don't know. Is it your opinion that they did not actually go to the moon?
With Apollo, I don't think that we did. I think this was truly a Kubrick production.
You really do, huh?
If we made it, perhaps with this technology that you're alluding to, perhaps we did.
Well, Werner von Braun was not actually interested in really helping us. He was interested in putting the brakes on our program, while he knew that the real program was being developed on the moon and Mars. So it wouldn't surprise me if we didn't make it to the moon.
Wait a second.
I've studied it.
You have another angle there that I haven't considered. You're saying that the von Braun and company may have pretended that we went, but in reality, he was putting the brakes so that the Nazis in Antarctica were the ones there already taken over. Is that what you're insinuating?
Well, what I'm insinuating is that he knew how important this was to Kennedy, and that Kennedy was absolutely fanatic about getting to the moon. So he did everything he could superficially, but I don't think he was doing what he really could have done, because he had a lot of scientist friends who were already here under Operation Paperclip, and I think they were working together. And his goal was not to help America get to the moon, I can tell you that. He may have been forced into it by Kennedy, but he himself, I don't think, was truly cooperative in that effort. My own feeling at this point, after thinking about it and talking to a lot of people at conferences, I've come to the conclusion that we probably did go to the moon. I think it was just too difficult to do that, to make that look like a real landing on a soundstage somewhere in Hollywood. I just don't think it was possible, even with Kubrick's help. And Kubrick was a genius, don't get me wrong. But I think it really was. We did get to the moon. I'm sure we did. But it explains why we never went back.
Well, that's another story. Why did we go back? But, when you look at the situation that happened with Grissom, Traffy, and White, and when Grissom said, we can't even talk to the next office, and he put a lemon on top of the module, that to me was the beginning. Like, wait a second, we're not going. And I think that what Kubrick did was not to show the world that we went to the moon, but it was in case we failed. And Nixon, Nixon even had that a scripted something that he had to read in the event that we didn't make it. But I don't think the United States wanted to tell the Soviets, "Hey, look, we failed. Now it's your turn."
Well, that sounds like the right motivation there, because it was a hedge against failure. I agree with that.
Exactly. Now
but I really think maybe they really did go, though. I've come to the conclusion that they did go. It just seemed too difficult to fake that.
I just want to believe. I want to believe that we went. But when I see the pictures of the moon, of Earth, supposedly taken from the moon, if you look at the size of the Earth and the size of the moon, it makes absolutely no sense. Furthermore, I haven't seen one single picture from NASA, admitted by NASA, saying that they're not composites. Not a single image. And don't you think that you and I, Len, would have commercialized the moon already? At least all these companies, Nike, and I just give Pepsi, Coca, whatever, shouldn't they have a camera on the moon? Call it Earth TV or Moon TV, and have a 24/7 picture of Earth with commercials underneath. How many people would be tuning into that? I would.
I know, of course, absolutely. Well, you know what could be behind this whole thing, Mel? By 1960, the Nazis already had a sizable presence on the moon, as I discussed in my book. They had taken that initial trip to the moon and started burrowing under the surface, and they had built a facility there. And that's probably the reason they didn't want it. That von Braun didn't want us there, and cooperated in making it a fake.
There you go.
There was just too much German presence already there.
See, that sounds more plausible. Yeah, it's almost like that movie. That movie. What's the name of that movie that came out a couple of years ago? It was kind of a comedy, but we were going to the moon, and then we found that the Nazis were there already.
Oh yeah, I know. I remember that. Yeah, I can't remember the name of it though. They were there ahead of us.
Iron something.
Oh, I think I know what you're talking about. I can't remember the name either. But the first Nazi moon landing was in 1942. 1942, according to the Bulgarian scientist, and who calls himself the dissident scientist.
Mm-hmm.
From 1942 to 1960, you could just imagine how far they had gotten already.
By the way, it's Iron Sky. That's the name of the movie.
Oh, Iron Sky. Yeah, that's right. I remember that now.
Now, I've been trying to just go in chronological order, and I was fast-forwarding to this part. But let me go way back in time. Who are the Atlants? I used to call them the Atlanteans, but you call them the Atlants. Are you referring to the Atlanteans?
Yes, I am referring to the Atlanteans. Yes, indeed.
Who were they, and where were they from?
Well, you do know about what happened in the Lyran system when the reptilians destroyed 3 planets and slaughtered 50 million humans.
Well, I have heard multiple sources talk about that story. Yes.
Well, I'm using the information from Sverdlow.
Stuart Sverdlow. Yeah.
I really respect his research, and I think he's absolutely right that this massacre did indeed take place, and this was the beginning of what we call the Federation. It was as a result of that slaughter and that horrible event that the humans in the Lyran system decided they had to develop spacefaring technology fast, and they had to start spacefaring trips all over the galaxy, and that's what began the space program from Lyra. And as a result of that program, some of those humans came here, and they settled all over the galaxy and formed about 110 colonies. Those colonies became what we now call the Federation. And the Federation developed very, very sophisticated technology and science. But that's what stimulated the whole program, the whole human program.
By the way, I'm not sure if it's your microphone or something, but there's something cracking every so often.
Oh, okay. I'm trying to avoid that.
So Atlantis, when you call it the Federation, are we talking about what we see in Egypt, what we see in Mesoamerica, what we see probably in Angkor Wat? That is what you call the Federation?
I'm talking about the human federation in the galaxy.
Oh, in the galaxy. Okay.
The federation of human colonies, human planets, human civilizations all over the galaxy. And basically it was stimulated by that slaughter in Lyra, because that's when they realized, the humans realized they had to go elsewhere in the galaxy and develop high technology in order to ward off any future attacks by the reptilians, because they realized that they were ruthless, that they had no concern for human life actually at all, and could do it again. Now, one of the races that was involved in this was a race called the Atlans, who really originated from the Pleiades originally. They actually originated in Lyra, and they were part of what took place there, but they basically immigrated to the Pleiades, and the Federation then decided that they were the right ones to send to this solar system to try and prevent the reptilians from taking it over, because they were ferocious, they were fierce fighters, they had high technology, they had spacefaring technology, and it was the Federation that sent them here to confront the reptilians, because we did not want this to become a reptilian solar system. They did not want this to become a reptilian solar system. And
are the Pleiadians the same as what Billy Meyer calls the Plejarans?
I don't know that. I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
The Pleiades is a very large star system, and there are many human colonies in the Pleiades. That much I know. I wouldn't say it's essentially a human solar system, star system, but let's put it this way: it's a human refuge from Lyra.
Plus, when it comes to Lemuria and Atlantis, are these two different races that we're talking about?
The reptilians were the first ones here. They were here before there were any humans on this planet, but there were humans in the solar system. There were humans on a very large planet called Maldek, which was between Jupiter and Mars. And there were millions of humans on that planet.
Is that today's asteroid belt?
That's right. That became the asteroid belt because the reptilians, when they arrived, they destroyed it. And it became the asteroid belt. And not only did they destroy Maldek, a lot of the Maldekians had already taken refuge on Mars. But as they went by Mars, they stripped the atmosphere, a lot of the atmosphere off of Mars, and reduced the oxygen content. And so they made this solar system basically unlivable for humans. And then they took over the planet that we now call Earth. So they were here long before they were on this planet, long before there were any humans here. They had this planet all to themselves. I think, according to my research, they had it, and according to what was told to me by Stuart Sverdlow and others, they were here for about 100,000 years before any humans arrived on this planet.
So if they were here before, they were no, but are they, this is one part that I've always confused because I've get sources who say some reptilians are benevolent and some reptilians are malevolent.
They have no heart chakra as we know it, and no compassion or any love. They do not have a love nature at all. So that's in their DNA. That's the way they're made. If there are some that are benevolent, it must be accidental, I would say, because they're just not built that way. They only know how to dominate and to take over and to take command of a planet or a solar system. So maybe there are some that have compassion, but I've seen no evidence of it at all in any of my research.
And by the way, I've met some people, and I bet you have met some people that are just like that. They look like humans, but it's almost like, there's no heart, no compassion. They just want what they want, and they don't care how they get it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And it's hard for us to understand how that kind of a creature could exist, but that's just the way they are. And they've dominated, they've taken over star systems all over the galaxy that way. According to Sverdlow, I believe it was Sverdlow that told me this, the reptilians basically have taken over about 21 star systems in this part of the galaxy. And when they take it over, they know how to run it. We can talk about this later, but I think that we have to get into the whole subject of AI eventually.
Oh, absolutely.
And, they are masters of AI. They are absolute masters of AI. And they are mentally very, very powerful.
Not only AI, but biogenetics, genetic manipulation. We'll talk about that later because this talk could be more timely based on what we're seeing right now. You turn on the news, I wonder if there's any relevant. We'll talk about it later. I don't want to open that can of worms right now. But okay. You say, so scientists say dinosaurs became extinct after a comet crashed you don't say that. That's what the theory, that's what you're taught in school, that a comet crashed in the Yucatan Peninsula, and that's how the dinosaurs became extinct. But you say dinosaurs were actually killed off by the Atlanteans. Explain this alternate theory.
According to Sverdlow and according to Robert Morning Sky, when the reptilians first came here, and he said it was about 1 million years ago, they brought the dinosaurs with them because the dinosaurs were their primary food source. They actually they bred them the same reason we breed cows and cattle. They needed them for their food. And so when they came here, they came inside what we might call a Death Star. It was actually a planet. It was a spaceship that appeared to be a planet. So they brought all of their flora and fauna with them. And when the Atlans arrived, the dinosaurs were trampling over their agricultural areas, and the first thing they did was start to kill the dinosaurs. They had the weaponry to do it, and they were sent here to confront the reptilians in the first place. So the wars between the Atlans and the reptilians broke out almost immediately after the Atlans arrived. And eventually, apparently, the Atlans had such sophisticated technology that they were able to actually weaken the foundations of the Lemurian continent. And ultimately, they caused Lemuria to sink beneath the Pacific Ocean. And so at that point, the reptilians realized that they had better take refuge underground, and that's what they did. But they're very skilled at building underground facilities, so it wasn't a big deal for them to go underground. But that's how Lemuria sank. Well, then they turned around and there was a counterattack, and they succeeded in sinking Atlantis. But the Atlantean humans, they were humans, were given a warning about that what was going to happen. And if you've read any of the Edgar Cayce material, have you read that?
I have.
So you know that the Atlanteans began a migration well in advance of the destruction of Atlantis, and they scattered all over the globe. They went to the Middle East, they went to Egypt, they went to Tibet, and they founded wisdom schools basically wherever they went. They went to Central America, so that by the time Atlantis sank, there were many human colonies all over the globe.
Well, whether this is true or not, it makes sense to me for the following reason. When you have Tibet persecuted by the Chinese, and even, I believe it was the Ananurba, the Germans, went to Tibet to get some information there from ancient, right? I'm glad you're saying that. Then we have Mesoamerica. Look at what happened to the Incas, the Mayas, the Aztecs. When the conquistadors came along, again, they buried their treasures, and we built churches on top of them, almost to erase that chapter of our history. And something else, when you look at Egypt and Mexico, in Spanish, Egypt, 3 syllables, Egipto. Mexico in Spanish, Mexico. Like the 3 almost rhyme. Could there be a correlation between the people in Mexico and the people in Egypt?
I believe so. I believe the Mayans could be compared to the early Egyptians. First of all, you've got the pyramids, and while they weren't identical, it was the same concept.
Right.
And the Mayans were very advanced, and probably the conquistadores wanted them wiped out for that reason. I wouldn't doubt it, because they were really forerunners of the church here, the Catholic Church, and they destroyed a lot of the Mayan and Aztec religious documents deliberately. So why did they do that? And so the humans in Central America and in Egypt are comparable in a lot of ways. I agree with that.
What do you make of this recent finding? Recent as in a couple of years. An archaeologist has discovered liquid mercury at the end of a tunnel beneath a Mexican pyramid. Why do you think, and they say that this could be the existence of a king's tomb. I don't buy this tomb thing. In the pyramid, we don't find a tomb. What do you make of this liquid mercury? Do you think this might prove one day of the reason for the pyramid's existence? Well, now, how did they actually come across this liquid mercury? In what form was it? Was it encased in something, or what? That's a good question. I haven't read the whole article, but I've been reading that after 1,800 years, they found this tunnel, and they found liquid mercury. And I don't know if they used ground-penetrating radar or they actually found the mercury there. But if it's indeed true, and they found liquid mercury, why would there be liquid mercury under the pyramid? Could this prove the functionality or the reason for the existence of these pyramids? Well, it wouldn't surprise me at all. I mean, when you look at that facility in Mexico, the pyramid complex in Mexico, the sun, they were equal. There was as advanced as the Egyptians were in terms of building those pyramids. They had to have some very
very good science and architectural capabilities to have done that. And so it really makes them very much comparable to the Egyptians, I think.
The question
No
is,
question about it.
how did they get the mercury if these were soulless savages? But they say the toxic silvery metal has been found at other archaeological sites in Mesoamerica, and because of its shimmery nature, may have been used to represent an underworld river or lake.
I just wonder what they would have been doing with that mercury.
Exactly.
How they would have been. What type of technology did they have that would somehow be helped by development of liquid mercury?
So you and I think of mercury perhaps being used for an anti-gravitic spaceship. And this is not too far-fetched. I've heard people who say that these pyramids were actually flying objects. I don't know. That seems implausible to me. But when you find that underground, liquid...
that's right.
Then could this be a reason?
Yeah, I recall now that our people did discover that some of the flying saucer technology used liquid mercury. So how would that? There must be a connection there.
Exactly.
It sounds like it. Yeah, I agree. I agree. It's very suspicious.
You also say the Atlants had powerful electromagnetic technology, which they used to destabilize the foundations of the Lemurian continent, which makes me wonder, perhaps you've seen what seem to be giant tree stumps all over the world. Have you seen these tree stumps all over the place?
I've seen it on Ancient Aliens. I think I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
So if these were giant trees that perhaps went all the way to the clouds, and they were trying to destabilize the foundations of this continent, could they have used this technology, I don't know, lasers, masers, to cut these trees, reduce the oxygen levels and the way the Earth was at that point?
Well, it's certainly possible. I don't know. I do know a lot about what happened on Atlantis, but I don't know enough about their technology. And I know that they had to be very advanced. Their technology had to be very advanced because of just looking at the architecture in Egypt, and we know that Egypt was their first colony when Atlantis went down, and they also had the ability to in biotechnology. They were creating combining the DNA of animals and humans. They had that capability. The Atlanteans were very, very advanced, and anything you can tell me about them, I would believe.
Well, when you remember Close Encounters, the movie?
Yes.
Have you researched Devil's Tower?
Yeah, I just wonder how it got there. It's a strange kind of promontory there in the middle of nowhere. What do you know about it?
Not only how it got there, but I saw a video a couple of years ago of this gentleman who, flew a drone on top of it. And the way, if you look at it as close up and you go all the way to the top, you see it's silicate. I believe silicate quartz, and it was almost alive, and it was just cut perfectly on top of it. So
Wow.
what I'm suggesting is perhaps we had a different type of trees in the past. These trees were just gargantuan, almost like if you saw the movie Avatar, but made of not the wood that we're used to, but a different material. And they were just cut from all over the place. When I traveled to Utah and you probably have too, since we live close to each other, you travel to Utah, to Colorado, New Mexico, and you see these plains, and then you see these, you have to have eyes to look. If you've been following what I'm saying, next time you travel that way in your car, look in the distance and you'll see all these trees. And a lot of the roots are connected for miles. If you hike them, you see them connected for miles. What
Really?
could this have been in the past?
This was in Utah, you say?
Utah, Arizona, Colorado, New Mexico. You just drive and look in the distance. You can't miss them. They're everywhere.
So how does that? So what are you speculating then about the Devil's Tower? What are you saying about
The
it?
same thing, that something happened in the past and it was just caught just like all these trees that were just gigantic trees, and these roots went for miles, and you can still see the trees the roots right now. Something happened in the past and they were just cut.
That's really very interesting. But the only thing I can tell you about Spielberg's choice of the Devil's Tower was that it had no connection with anything else. He just decided to use that because it was dramatic.
Oh, of course. What a great
dramatic.
poster.
Yeah. Whereas the real landing, I think he knew that from his connection with the DIA that the real landing was in the atomic test ground.
In New Mexico?
No, in
Nevada.
In Nevada, yeah.
Right. And by the way, since I have you here, the one book that I never discussed with you, and now that you mentioned Close Encounters, because your book begins, in my opinion, at the end of the movie Close Encounters. When the Greys come to us, they don't tell us, but we sent a number of hours to their planet, Serpo. Have you seen that connection?
Well, I wrote the book, The Secret Journey to Planet Serpo. Yeah,
right.
You know that.
Yes, of course, and that's what I'm saying, because at the end of the movie, they come to us, but the story of Serpo is that they came to us, I believe there were, how many? 12, 13, something like that? And then we sent the same amount of people to their planet. Some died, some stayed, and some returned, right?
Yeah, well, I don't know how many they sent here. I mean, I know that the two spacecraft collided in Roswell. Two of their spacecraft collided in Roswell.
Oh, you mean the Roswell incident was a collision not brought down by radar?
Exactly. It was a collision, but the root cause could have been the radar, and in fact, it probably was the radar to confuse their navigational systems because they collided. And one of them ended up near Corona, and the other one ended up about 100 miles away to the west. And that one wasn't discovered for an entire year. We discovered that a year later. The second one, the second one, and so it could have been. There was a lightning storm that night, true, but their particular navigational system was built into their suits and into their helmets, and that's probably what caused the confusion and caused them to collide. I don't know.
I always say
it was a collision.
I always say, Len, that for a civilization as advanced as they were, they made it all the way here to crash on arrival.
Exactly, but they had been here before. It was nothing new. They had been here before many times. And what I think brought them to that particular location was the atomic. They knew it was the center of our atomic bomb development, and they wanted to keep tabs on that.
Somebody told me the other day, Len, and I don't know if this is true or not, but it sounded plausible to me, that you know the name Forrestal, Secretary Forrestal, our first Secretary of Defense, right?
Yeah.
And the way that he supposedly died. Many people say that he was killed, and he was, what is it? The one who came after Roosevelt. No, that the president.
Truman.
Truman actually asked him to resign, asked for his resignation, because supposedly he was crazy and he was sent to a mental institution, and that's what happened. But before that, apparently there was a persecution, like a persecution where some people died. And I'm talking in addition to what happened to Admiral Byrd. And Forrestal was so incensed by it that he wanted to find a way to just make one of those ships crash. And he was supposedly the one who gave the order to use radar technology in order to do that. Do you buy that?
Well, I know Forrestal was he was Secretary of the Navy, wasn't he?
Well, he became the first Secretary of Defense after he was the Secretary of the Navy.
Right, and it was the Navy. It was our people who were infiltrating Germany as spies that were an asset, were a naval asset. Are you familiar with the William Tompkins story?
I am.
You know that the Navy was responsible for sending over those spies to Germany and to get that technology.
Yes, and not only that, but even after. Now we have a Space Force, but it's not the Air Force that really was into UFOs. I mean, look at the testimonial for William Cooper. That's
right. It was the Navy. It was the Naval Intelligence was
correct.
Was responsible for it. But the whole point was that Forrestal must have been involved in that as Secretary of the Navy. He had to be. And so, and at that point, what year did he actually die, Forrestal? I can't recall. Do you remember that?
I'll find it in the 40s. Let's see. Keep talking. I'll find it.
Was it in the 50s? I don't remember if it was in the 50s or not. In any case, at that point already, the German influence was starting to manifest in this country.
1949, by the way. May 22nd, 1949 is when he died.
Okay, all right. So there it is. That was 7 years after Roswell.
Actually, 2 years after Roswell.
I'm sorry, 2 years. 2 years after Roswell. But in any case, the Germans were already infiltrating our aerospace companies and our government. And it may have been that they wanted him dead. And we do know that the head of the CIA, Allen Dulles, Dulles didn't become the head of the CIA until 1953, but he was active, and so was Alan Foster Dulles. They may have just wanted him out of the way because they knew that the Navy was developing this technology and had spied on the German scientists. I don't know.
Yeah, look at the connections. Yes, absolutely. I'm agreeing with you exactly what you're saying. And who was Forrestal's protege? John F. Kennedy. In fact, he took Kennedy to, I don't know if it was Peenemünde or he took him to Germany to see what happened after the war. And when they returned, they were both Catholics. They were both in sync with one another. And the common denominator, they were hated by the Dulles brothers. I mean, Look what happened at Kennedy when he died. Who was one in the Warren Commission? Allen Dulles.
Allen Dulles.
Who was fired shortly before his death.
Yes,
right?
Exactly. Yeah, and Kennedy had already told them he was going to break the CIA up into 1,000 pieces.
Into the wind.
Yes. No, there's no question that Dulles was a Nazi sympathizer. I've made that point several times in my book. He definitely was a Nazi sympathizer. Now, whether his brother was also, I don't know, but I think they both were. And I pointed out that both of them went to Germany in 1933 to help Hitler get financing for his campaign to become the chancellor. They were representing Kuhn-Lee Company as lawyers. And they helped Hitler get financing for his campaign to become the chancellor of Germany. So right there we have a major connection.
Who was the director of the CIA when Kennedy died? Do you know?
When Kennedy died?
Yeah.
Well, Dulles.
Oh, it was Dulles. Okay.
Yeah, Dulles. He became the director in 1953.
That's right. And who came after him? Well, in the 1970s, probably, it was George H.W. Bush, who is in the same cabal.
Exactly. That's right. But so it may very well have been that they considered Forrestal in the way of what they wanted to do, what they wanted to accomplish, and they had to get him out of the way. It's very unlikely that he jumped from a 16-story window. It just doesn't make sense. He had no motivation to do it.
I talked to another researcher years ago who told me that they found his brother, Forrestal's brother. He actually came to identify the body, and one of the orderlies at the hospital, when he saw him there, the first thing he said was, "Your brother did not commit suicide."
Oh, is that right?
Did you hear that before?
Yeah, no, I never have heard that before.
Your brother did not commit suicide. They knew something was going on, and they wanted to get rid. I mean, this is the way they do it. I mean, look how many people are suicided all the time with 2 gunshots to their brains, and they still put that in the forensics analysis. 2 shots to the brain.
I know. Well, let's see. Let's go back now. If that was 1949, that's what you said, right?
Yes, when he died. Yeah.
Don't forget that Operation High Jump had just been 2 years before that.
Correct.
Okay, and he was behind Operation High Jump.
Correct, and this is why I told you that he was mad about what happened to Admiral Byrd, and he wanted to just crash one of those UFOs that killed some of the Americans during High Jump.
Exactly, and the Nazis were able to somehow arrange for his death.
Right.
How? I don't know. They must have had the connections to send somebody up to his room and push him out the window. Who knows? It would have been an easy thing to do, really.
Now, let me ask you this, Len. You probably have heard of the work of Dr. Richard Sauter and some other people who talk about underground bases in the United States, that trillions of dollars spent, the highway network of magnetic levitation technology. I mean, this is like on a vacuum at 700 miles per hour, Mach 1.5 or Mach 2.
Mm-hmm.
My question about this is, the reptilians who have been underground, do you think the reptilians inhabit some of, and perhaps control some of these underground bases?
Absolutely. Absolutely. The reptilian colonies, some of them go down 200 miles. And when Lemuria sank and they went underground, they had no problem building high-speed railroad systems and space portals to allow them to get out into the galaxy. The technology of the reptilians is beyond belief. You have to understand, it goes back thousands of years. They were cruising around the galaxy in their spaceships thousands of years ago, according to Robert Morningsky. So can you imagine what they had going on underground? And we know they built a capital city under Tibet called Bogavita that was 7 stories high. So they were completely at home underground. And they've had these high-speed railroad systems for a very, very long time. So possibly they are still there. What we do know of what happened with the death of who was the one that died in northern New Mexico. What was his name? I can't think of his name right now.
Died how, or what? Under what circumstances?
Chet. He was one of the engineers involved in creating the underground.
Oh, you're talking about Phil.
Phil, yes.
Oh, I cannot believe that I'm forgetting his name. Phil Schneider. Phil Schneider.
Phil Schneider, yeah. Phil Schneider. Didn't he talk about these things? As I recall, he did mention some of this stuff, didn't he?
Not only did he talk about it, but I'm told that the reason why he was killed, and if anybody doubts that he was killed, because people say, Mel, you're a conspiracy theorist. Yes, I am, because I'm looking for the truth. But if you look at the photographs, which I have in my possession, of his dead body, you tell me, if you would commit suicide that way, it would be impossible.
Oh, yeah, I heard about that.
And I'm told the reason why he was murdered was because he was showing material, metals that he was not supposed to be showing, that were not made on this plane called Earth.
Right, and so that tells us right there that he was interfering in the underground facilities of the reptilians at that point. So they may have been the Greys. The reptilians control the Greys. We know that. The Greys they're really a semi automated version. They're not really completely biological. The reptilians were upset with perhaps what Schneider was doing, and decided they wanted him out of the way.
You think the Greys are bio-robots? We're talking about AI later, right. But these are biological entities, yes, but they're perhaps cloned, and they don't, what I'm told. Have you met Derek Tyler, by the way?
No, I have not.
Great guy. I had him on the show a few weeks ago, and he told me that the reason why a lot of abductees report going into the ships, and the smell is putrid, and I'm told that the reason why is because they use our blood, or the blood of animals, just like the cattle mutilations that we see. They extract the blood, and they basically bathe in that blood, and they absorb it from their pores, and that's what keeps them alive. Have you heard that?
The Greys, the Greys or the reptilians?
The Greys.
Well, we do know that the reptilians drink human blood, and we know that they eat human flesh. We know that. We learned that from a number of different people. David Icke is one of them, but many others. So, I think it was Phil Schneider that said the smell, as he descended down that elevator,
right?
He said the smell was horrible.
Yep.
So what you're saying makes sense, and if the reptilians drink human blood, which several people have testified to, then it's likely that their creation, the Greys, probably do the same.
By the way, I don't mean to bring this up right now, but because a lot of the stuff that we're discussing, maybe years ago, to many people would have sounded like science fiction.
I know.
You've heard the term adrenochrome, which I basically use that term almost in every interview, just because I want people to wake up to that term, adrenochrome. And if you told me before, oh, the reptilians eat people or drink blood, I would think, oh, come on, you're reading too much science fiction. But what I know now is that it's not only the reptilians, it's those people who are behind the scenes controlling. Take in Hollywood, a restaurant that serves human meat. And how do they get the human meat? Volunteers in their 20s and 30s. Sporty people who go there almost like gladiators. And they know if they lose, that's what the chef is going to be served on the platter that night. And this is the kind of stuff that's happening. And with this coronavirus thing, I'm told that a multi-trillion-dollar shipment of powdered adrenochrome came from China and was confiscated. And if you don't know what adrenochrome is, Len, and find out how it's extracted and obtained, get ready for a new awakening.
Well, tell me. I want to know. I really don't know what adrenochrome. I've heard the term before, but I can't remember what it is.
See, our conversation is kind of a PG, but now we're taking to the restricted area. And this is what's going to, we're coming to a few minutes before we close the show. Let me not say any more about this, because this is what always gets me shut down on YouTube when I talk about this. So I'll talk about it in part 2. But let me ask you this. Where do you think the Space Force is taking us?
I don't know what you think about Donald Trump, but when he announced the Space Force thing, he gets very top secret briefings still from the CIA. You know that, right?
No,
and
I would
so
think.
he knows a lot of what's going on. How much he knows, I don't know. But this Space Force is a totally unnecessary concept, because we already have Solar Warden. You know about Solar Warden, I think, probably, and we have a training academy for the Solar Warden pilots in Medford, Oregon.
Yeah, but Solar Warden was not publicly known. When he announced that, and Pence announced that, the first thought that came to mind was, oh, they finally are going to admit we need more funding, the trillions of dollars lost. Remember September 10th, 2001, when Rumsfeld went before Congress and said, we misplaced, or we can't find $2.3 trillion.
I know.
Well, now they're basically saying, well, not with the name Breakaway Civilization or Secret Space Program, might as well just come out and say it. I mean, what do we have an Air Force for? And what do we need a space for? I mean, if you put satellite platforms with, the work of Carol Rosin, Dr. Carol Rosin, she talks about weapons in space. Usually those weapons are pointing down at us and not out.
Right, exactly. Wasn't she von Braun's secretary?
Correct.
Yeah, that's right. She was von Braun's. We know that the Air Force is not behind the real Space Force. It's the Navy, and they don't really talk to each other that much. So, if this Space Force is supposedly an outgrowth of the Air Force, is that what he said?
I think somebody from the Air Force, Deputy Secretary, was the one who's now commanding the Space Force. So it came from the Air Force. The people are being transferred from the Air Force. We're not being told that they're coming from the Navy.
Exactly, and we know from the writings of William Tompkins that the whole thing is naval, and that's why Star Trek was based on naval.
Right, the USS Enterprise.
Spaceship. Yeah, and Roddenberry made a point of that. So I don't know what the Space Force is. I don't really understand what it's all about. I mean, we're way beyond that whole thing now. Way beyond. We have a colony on Mars. We have a colony on the Moon. We can land on Mars. If we get permission from the Nazi people who run the show there, we can land there. We can still use that colony. It's a joint U.S.-Russian colony to begin with. So what do we need? What do we need the Space Force for? I mean, Ben Rich said we've already are patrolling the whole galaxy,
and we can take ET home.
We can take ET home. I mean, so what is it all about? What is that all about? What do you think it's all about?
Well, Gary McKinnon. Remember Gary McKinnon?
Yeah, I do. I wrote about it.
The alleged hacker. I don't think he was a hacker. He was just somebody with Asperger's. And honestly, I think I have a little bit of Asperger's, and this is why I do what I do, because I want to get to the bottom of things. So he got into a computer and just dialed in, and was able to get in. He didn't use any hacking technology. He basically, it's like if you're walking by the Pentagon and the door is open, well, you peek. All of a sudden, you committed a crime because the door was open and you saw a spaceship there in a hangar 18 somewhere. But I think
that's what I said. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
What he said, the two USS Roscoe Hillenkotter and USS Curtis LeMay, almost that we have a fleet of these spaceships going around. Right. And this is when? The early 2000s?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. He stumbled into the Solar Warden files. And I say stumbled because that's probably exactly what happened. He wouldn't have known where to look.
Right.
So somehow he stumbled into the files, and he that was basically Solar Warden. That's what Solar Warden is.
So you think what he was saying about Roscoe Hillenkotter and the rest of them, this is when it's now becoming the U.S. Space Force?
Now, what is becoming the U.S. Space Force?
What we have before. We've already had, in my opinion, this branch of the military, but we were not publicly letting people know that we had it. When Trump came along, he probably said, hey, we're just sending these billions and billions of dollars somewhere to this black hole. Let's just let it be known that we have this Space Force.
But my understanding is that it did not evolve out of the Air Force. It evolved out of the Navy.
Okay. Yeah, it could be.
Because William Tompkins was working with naval assets and designing huge spacecraft, in some cases miles long, that he helped design. You know that, right? I'm
sure you've read. Absolutely.
So I think that perhaps the Air Force version does not have the whole story. I don't think they have the whole story that the Navy has.
I think I heard, Bill Cooper, when he used to sell his shows on tape in the 90s. I believe I heard one many, many years ago where a caller, called and said, why is it that the UFO topic is mostly under the control of the Navy? And Cooper was, in former Navy intelligence. And I believe his answer was something along the lines like, because we have submarines and a sheep of vessels all over the world in the ocean, and they are the ones who see UFOs more than even the Air Force. And this is why. That's, I believe, what he said.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense to me. And I think Al Bielek, didn't Al Bielek have something to say about that?
Exactly. Poor Al Bielek. I mean, we spoke probably about 3 months before he died. I wanted to interview him, but he was very, very hard of hearing, and I couldn't. But believe me, that was an incredible story, Al Bielek's, huh?
Oh yeah, that really was, because he worked with them. He worked directly with the aliens. And I quoted from him in the book. You might have read that, what he said. But that would explain why they would want to assassinate the Secretary of the Navy. It makes sense that he knew too much, and they wanted him out of the way.
What was the name of the other individual? You probably have heard his name too. I forgot. Stranger at the Pentagon.
Oh yeah.
Valiant Thor. What was the name of this individual who also just happened to have died immediately after I started this program? His wife told me, if you had contacted him 2 weeks ago, he would have loved to be on your show, but he just passed away 2 days ago when I talked to her.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about. Stranger at the Pentagon by he was a minister, wasn't he?
I'm not sure if he was a minister.
Yeah, he was, and he was supposedly met the visitor from Venus. Did he actually meet him? I think he did. Yeah. I know who you're talking.
Valiant
about.
Thor.
Valiant Thor was the name of the visitor.
The visitor, right?
But the guy that wrote the book was can't think of his name right now. He wrote Stranger at the Pentagon.
Correct.
Yeah.
And anyway, we have to take a one and only intermission. How can people buy Dark Fleet, the Secret Nazi Program, and the Battle for the Solar System?
Okay, the book actually officially goes on sale on the 10th, which is next week. but review copies are available. And they're taking pre-orders on it, so they can order it right now, and it'll be sent to them immediately when it gets published on the 10th.
And no worries, because I, on purpose, will be airing this after the book is out. So no worries, folks.
Right,
That's
great.
It will be readily available when you listen to this program. Folks, don't go anywhere. I have a lot of stuff, a lot more, a lot of doors that you're opening with this new book. Len Kasten is my special guest today on Veritas. This is Mel Fabregas, and I'll see you in the members section. Don't go anywhere.
Thank you for listening to the first part of this important Veritas interview. To listen to the rest and all of our material, proceed to the members section or join the Veritas family by subscribing. Click on the subscribe button at veritasradio.com. You can make your purchase with a credit card, PayPal, cash, check, money order, and even cryptocurrency. We are now accepting Bitcoin, Litecoin, and Ethereum. Don't forget to visit the Veritas store for Focus Life Force Energy, MMS, CBD Pure Hemp Oil, Divinia Water, Pure Organic Sulfur, flash drives with all our Sanitas and Veritas seasons, and other great products. And if you're listening on YouTube, like, subscribe, and share it. And click the bell to be notified when new interviews are available. Now, proceed to the members section or subscribe to listen to the rest of the interview. You don't want to miss it. Thank you for listening to Veritas. Because you don't want to believe. You want to know.